I remember the exact second everything shifted. The moment the future I feared collided with the truth I had kept hidden for years. It happened inside a silent courtroom on a Tuesday morning, where the air felt heavy and even the fluorescent lights seemed unforgiving. My name is Hannah Blake, and at 28 years old, I found myself sitting at a wooden table across from the man I once believed I would grow old with, Dr. Lucas Warren. A man who used to fall asleep with his head on my lap during late-night study sessions, a man I once imagined starting a family with. Now he sat only 20 feet away, wearing a tailored charcoal suit and a watch that cost more than my monthly rent. He did not look at me, not once. Beside him sat his attorney, a confident man who spoke as if he had already won. Beside me sat Lily Grant, my best friend since 8th grade and now the only person willing to stand up for me when my world fell apart. When she squeezed my hand under the table, it felt like she was holding the last piece of me together. Your Honor, Lucas deserves to move forward with his life without unnecessary financial burden. Mrs. Blake made minimal contributions to the marriage. She held low-wage jobs and offered no meaningful career development. The attorney's voice echoed through the room like it was rehearsed. Minimal contributions, low wage, no value. Every word landed like a stone on my chest. Lucas sat there nodding, barely blinking, as if none of this had anything to do with me. But Lily's expression did not change. She waited. She knew something he did not. When the attorney finished, Lily stood and gave me a small nod. The signal. I rose to my feet, my legs weak but steady, and walked toward Judge Miriam Walters. In my hand was a plain manila envelope. An envelope that would change everything. 8 years before that courtroom changed my life, things were different. Back then, Lucas Warren was not a celebrated surgeon with a spotless reputation and a perfect suit. He was just Lucas, a 22-year-old medical student with big dreams and an even bigger student loan balance. And I was 19, studying communications at a small community college in Pennsylvania. We met at a local bookstore where I worked part-time. Lucas walked in looking exhausted, carrying a backpack that seemed heavier than he was. He asked if we sold used medical textbooks because he could not afford new ones. I showed him the shelf in the back and he laughed nervously when he saw the prices. That nervous laugh was the first thing about him that pulled me in. It felt honest. We started talking. Then talking turned into study breaks. Study breaks turned into late-night walks around the neighborhood. Within months, we got married at the county courthouse with Lily and Lucas's cousin as witnesses. No fancy dress, no flowers, just the two of us standing there believing love and determination were enough. Our first apartment was barely livable. The floors creaked, the bathroom tiles were cracked, and the kitchen had 4 mismatched cabinets that slanted to one side. But we were in love. We would sit on the carpet eating dollar store noodles and planning out our future together. Every time Lucas felt overwhelmed with school, he would rest his head on my shoulder and say one day, "I will take care of you the way you take care of me." I believed him. But medical school was more expensive than either of us realized. Even with his loans, we struggled. Bills piled up so quickly we could not see the bottom of them. Rent, utilities, groceries, textbooks, fees. Everything multiplied faster than we earned. One night, we sat at our tiny kitchen table staring at a stack of overdue notices. The refrigerator hummed loudly in the background, filling the silence neither of us could break. It was in that moment I realized something had to change, and the change had to start with me. I was the one who spoke first that night, though my voice barely rose above a whisper. "Lucas, what if I take a break from school?" He looked up, confused, almost startled, like the idea had never once crossed his mind. Take a break? Why would you do that? Because we were drowning. Because no matter how many hours we both worked, it was never enough. Because someone had to keep us afloat while he chased a dream that required everything we had and more. I told him I could work full-time for a year, maybe 2, until he finished medical school. Then, once he started residency, I could go back to finish my own degree. I said the words calmly, but inside it felt like handing over a piece of myself. Lucas shook his head at first. He said he did not want me giving up anything for him. But the longer he stared at those overdue bills, the more his expression shifted. Hope slipped into the cracks of his worry. And eventually he squeezed my hand and whispered, "Are you sure?" I nodded, even though I was not. Within a week, I withdrew from community college. I picked up extra shifts at the bookstore and then applied for a second job at a small diner down the street. A month later, when Lucas needed money for new medical equipment and a laptop that could run his imaging software, I added a third job cleaning office buildings at night. My new routine became relentless. I woke before sunrise, worked the cashier counter until mid-afternoon, rested for an hour if I had the strength, then headed to the diner. 3 nights a week, I left the diner and went straight to the office building to clean floors, empty trash bins, wipe down desks, and scrub bathrooms until midnight. I ate whatever was cheap and fast, drank too much coffee, and slept far too little. My hands grew rough from cleaning chemicals, and my eyes carried permanent shadows from exhaustion. But Lucas was thriving. He was at the top of his class, his professors praised him, his classmates envied him. And every night, when he wrapped his arms around me and whispered, "Thank you, Hannah," I could not help but believe it was all worth it. By Lucas's 3rd year of medical school, something subtle began to shift. At first I could not name it. It was in the pauses between his words, in the way he hesitated before introducing me to new classmates, in the new world he was entering while I stayed behind in ours. His clinical rotations placed him in one of the largest hospitals in the region. Suddenly, he was surrounded by people whose lives looked nothing like ours. His classmates came from families with lake houses, trust funds, and weekend trips to Aspen. Their spouses wore tailored coats and talked about art shows, architecture, and vacations I had only ever seen on TV. The first time Lucas invited me to a small gathering with them, I tried my best to fit in. I wore my simple blue dress and practiced small talk in the mirror. But the moment we walked in, I felt painfully out of place. The room smelled of expensive perfume, and the conversations floated around me like a language I could not speak. One woman looked at my hands and asked if I worked in healthcare too. Before I could answer, Lucas cut in quickly, saying she helps out here and there. His voice was light, but his eyes darted away from mine, like he didn't want anyone to know that the reason my hands were dry and cracked was because I scrubbed office floors until midnight. After that night, he stopped inviting me to events. The differences between us grew sharper. He started commenting on the clothes I wore, asking if I had ever thought about dressing more professionally. He suggested I watch the news so I would have something to contribute to conversations. He stopped kissing me goodbye when I left for my early shifts, saying I smelled too much like the diner's coffee station. Bit by bit, the man who once thanked me for every sacrifice began to look at me like I was holding him back. And for the first time, I wondered if I actually was. Our 8th wedding anniversary arrived on a quiet Tuesday in October. I remember waking up that morning with a kind of hopeful determination, the kind you get when you want so badly to bring something back to life. I had planned for weeks, saving every spare dollar I could from my diner tips. I left my cashier shift early, losing half a day's pay just so I could prepare. I made Lucas's favorite meal, the same chicken parmesan I used to cook in the tiny apartment, where our love once felt larger than our struggles. I found a simple cake at a small neighborhood bakery. I even lit a few candles I had bought from the dollar store. The apartment looked warm again, like a home rather than a place we simply passed through. I wore the nicest dress I owned, a soft navy blue one I had bought years ago. I curled my hair the way Lucas used to say he loved. For the first time in a long time, I let myself imagine that maybe tonight things could feel right again. But 6 o'clock came and went, then 7, then 8. Finally, at 8:30, I texted him, "Are you coming home soon? Dinner is ready." His reply came 15 minutes later, "Stuck at the hospital, emergency consult." My heart sank, but I tried to be understanding. He was a doctor now. Emergencies happened. But when the front door finally opened at 9:45, Lucas did not walk in wearing scrubs. He wore one of his expensive suits, and he smelled faintly of a perfume I did not own. He barely glanced at the table I had spent hours preparing. When I whispered that it was our anniversary, he sighed as if I had inconvenienced him. "Some things are more important than dinner, Hannah. You need to understand that." But it was not the dinner he dismissed that night. It was me. The days after our anniversary blurred into something heavy and airless. Lucas barely spoke to me except to mention his long hours or upcoming meetings. Then, one evening, I came home from the diner and found a large envelope on the kitchen counter with my name on it. Inside were the divorce papers. No conversation, no explanation, just legal pages spelling out how little I mattered. He offered me almost nothing. A tiny settlement and $1,000 a month for 2 years. After 8 years of marriage, after 6 years of me working myself into the ground so he could become the successful doctor he now was. The message was clear. In his eyes, I had contributed nothing. That night, I sat on the bathroom floor and read every word on those papers until they blurred. The woman staring back at me in the mirror looked older, smaller, worn thin. My hands were cracked. My shoulders slumped. My spirit felt scraped empty. That was how Lily found me. She used her spare key when I didn't answer the door. She took one look at me sitting on the tiles and silently lowered herself to the floor beside me. She wrapped her arms around me like she had 100 times before when we were kids. Except this time I felt breakable in a way I never had. "Hannah, he is not going to tear you apart like this," she whispered. "Not if I have anything to say about it." I shook my head. "I have nothing, Lily. No career, no savings, no degree. Nothing to fight with." Lily cupped my face with both hands. "You have the truth. And that is more powerful than anything he owns." And just like that, the first spark of a fight I thought I'd lost flickered back to life. Once Lily decided to take my case, she approached it with the kind of determination that could split mountains. She told me to gather every document I had kept over the years: old leases, saved receipts, pay stubs, tax forms, anything that could paint the picture Lucas was trying so hard to erase. We spent evenings sitting at my tiny kitchen table, sorting through 8 years of our life in stacks of paper. Lily highlighted, circled, and took notes until her pen ran dry. She asked questions I had never thought to ask myself. Who paid this bill? Whose name is on this lease? Who bought this equipment? Where did this money come from? The answers were always the same. Me. Mine. I did. Piece by piece, a different story emerged. One Lucas hoped no one would ever look closely enough to see. Then came the turning point. Lily was scrolling through my old bank statements when she paused, leaned forward, and squinted at the screen. "Hannah, do you remember a tuition issue during Lucas's 3rd year? Something about his student loan being delayed." I nodded slowly. He was panicking. If the payment didn't go through, he would have been dropped from the program. We were desperate. Lily turned the laptop toward me. "Your account shows a $40,000 loan deposit that same month. Do you remember taking out a loan that large?" My breath caught in my throat. Yes, I did. The loan was in my name. I had signed for it alone because Lucas's credit was already buried under medical school debt. I had given every dollar of it to him so he could stay enrolled. Then Lily found it. A folded document buried in a file I had almost thrown away 2 years earlier. A promissory note. Lucas had written and signed it himself, promising to repay me once he became a practicing physician. "Hannah, this is huge," Lily whispered. "He told the court you made no direct financial contributions. But this is proof. Ironclad proof." But that was not all. When Lily requested Lucas's financial records through Discovery, another transaction surfaced. One I had never known about. $70,000 transferred from our marital account to a company owned by a woman named Olivia Park. Someone he had been spending a lot of time with, someone he had described as just a colleague. Lily looked at me, her voice steady. "This is no longer just about divorce. This is financial betrayal. And tomorrow, Hannah, he is going to answer for it." The morning of the hearing, I dressed slowly, choosing the same navy dress I had worn to Lucas's medical school graduation. It was the nicest thing I owned. But that wasn't why I chose it. I wanted him to see the woman he once promised the world to, the woman he now claimed had offered him nothing. Lily handed me the manila envelope in the hallway outside the courtroom. Inside was everything we had gathered. Every receipt, every bank statement, every paycheck. The promissory note, and the record of the $70,000 transfer to Olivia Park. "When the moment is right, you give this to Judge Walters," Lily said softly. "And remember, you have already survived the hardest part." We walked inside. Lucas looked sharp, confident, untouchable. He sat beside his attorney like a man certain the outcome was already written. He barely glanced at me before checking the time on his expensive watch. His attorney began with the same polished speech he had practiced during the previous hearing. "Your Honor, my client has carried the financial weight of this marriage. Mrs. Blake made minimal economic contributions, held low-skilled jobs, and lacks any significant earning potential." Lily sat still, waiting. Her calmness steadied my breathing. When the attorney finally sat, Lucas leaned back in his chair, satisfied. Then it was our turn. Lily rose first, her voice measured. "Your Honor, before we proceed, my client has documents she would like to submit into evidence." Judge Walters nodded. "Bring them forward." Lily looked at me. That was the signal. I stood. My hands trembled, but my steps did not falter as I walked to the judge's bench and placed the manila envelope before her. The courtroom was silent except for the soft rustle of paper as Judge Walters opened it. Her eyes moved across the first document, then the next, then the next. Her expression changed. First neutral. Then surprised. Then something close to disbelief. She turned another page and let out a short, unexpected laugh. The sound echoed through the quiet courtroom, startling everyone, including me. She pressed a hand to her mouth, shook her head, and looked directly at Lucas. "Mr. Warren," she said, her voice now edged with something unmistakable, "we have a serious problem." Lucas straightened in his seat, color draining from his face. For the first time since the hearing began, he looked afraid. Judge Walters set the documents down slowly, almost deliberately, as if giving Lucas one last chance to prepare himself for what was coming. He shifted in his seat, clearing his throat, his confidence slipping through the cracks like sand. "Mr. Warren," she began, "it appears your attorney has presented a version of events that does not align with the actual financial trail of this marriage." She lifted the promissory note between two fingers. "According to this signed document, you received a $40,000 loan from Mrs. Blake for your medical school tuition, a legally binding loan that you have neither repaid nor disclosed." Lucas opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His attorney leaned toward him, whispering urgently. Lucas shook his head, his eyes locked on the judge like he was hoping she would suddenly stop talking. She did not. "In addition," Judge Walters continued, "Mrs. Blake's bank statements show she covered 100% of the couple's living expenses for 6 years, often working multiple jobs to do so." Then she held up the final page, the one that made the entire courtroom lean in. "And here," she said, tapping the document, "is a $70,000 transfer from your joint marital account to a business owned by Ms. Olivia Park. A transaction made 3 months before filing for divorce and without your wife's knowledge or consent." A ripple of murmurs spread across the courtroom. Lucas's composure broke. That was an investment opportunity. It had nothing to do with. Judge Walters raised her hand sharply. "Enough." She fixed him with a stare that could have carved stone. "Your wife sacrificed her education, her health, and her future earning potential so you could pursue your career. Without her, you would not be sitting in this courtroom as a physician. For you to now argue she provided minimal contributions is not only dishonest, it is insulting." Lucas swallowed hard, his attorney sat frozen. "Here is my ruling." She spoke each sentence with a clarity that made the room feel electric. "You will repay the $40,000 loan plus 6 years of interest, totaling $56,000. Half of all marital assets will be awarded to Mrs. Blake, including retirement accounts and investments. Given her sacrificed opportunities, she is granted compensatory spousal support of $4,000 per month for 6 years. And finally, the $70,000 transferred to Ms. Park's company must be returned to the marital estate and divided equally." Lucas slumped in his chair, stunned, defeated. "As for you, Mrs. Blake," the judge said, turning to me with a gentler tone, "this court recognizes your contribution for what it truly was, the foundation of his success." Then she struck the gavel. We were adjourned. And just like that, the future Lucas thought he owned slipped out of his hands. 6 months passed, and for the first time in years, life felt quiet in a way that did not hurt. I had moved into a small but bright apartment on the edge of town, a place with sunlight that pooled on the floors each morning and windows that opened without getting stuck. It was nothing luxurious, but it was mine. I enrolled in the business administration program at the local community college. Walking into a classroom again after so long felt surreal, like stepping into a version of myself I had once abandoned. But this time, I wasn't there for anyone else's dream. I was there for mine. The first semester was hard. I was rusty, nervous, and older than most of my classmates. But I studied. I stayed late. I asked questions. I pushed myself the way I once pushed Lucas, except now the effort was poured into a future I could actually call my own. When my grades came back, straight A's glowed across my screen. I stared at them for a long time, letting the pride sink in. Then an email arrived, a scholarship for non-traditional students, covering my full tuition for the next year. Lily took me out for coffee to celebrate. She said she always knew I would rise, even when I didn't believe it myself. I laughed because for once I could feel the truth in her words. A few days later, I walked past Metropolitan General Hospital on my way home. Through the wide glass windows, I could see doctors and nurses weaving through the lobby. Somewhere in there, Lucas was working, wearing his white coat, living the life he had chosen. I stood there for a moment, expecting something: anger, sadness, regret, but none of it came. All I felt was peace. I had spent 6 years building someone else's future. Now I was finally building my own. And for the first time in a long time, I could see it clearly. I could feel it growing, steady and bright. If you've ever rebuilt yourself after being broken, or if you've walked away from someone who never saw your worth, let me know where you're watching from. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true stories on the art of revenge.